Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. This is Greg Lawson, and you're unfortunately watching Detective Diaries. I think this is episode 400 of Detective Diaries, and I, I meant to say episode 4 of Detective Diaries. The previous Detective Diaries, I've talked with Marcus Hardy, who is with Guy Marcus, and he's also the head guy for Area 51 or Area 52 podcast. He's a professional comedian. We had a really good time. And then we talked with Kenna Hunter with the RIP files, and that was a blast getting to see Kenna again. And then we also just a couple of days ago, um, we got to talk with Dr. Shay Steingass, a marine biologist, about sea serpents and sea monsters and stuff like that. So today, I've asked a friend of mine from Ireland to come in and talk with us. And him and I met when I went over for the All Ireland Paracon a few years ago, and so we've kept in touch. And I wanted to something happen. If you're watching, if you can go down to the comments and comment where you are watching from, what city you're in, and if you have any questions for us, you can also ask us questions as we go along. That's as long as I am receiving the live feed, of course. Also, you can um, post any other stuff that you find of interest. If you can share this broadcast, that would be really cool. So, without further ado, let's bring in my friend Damian. Hey, Damian.
Hi, Greg. How are
Hey,
you?
man. I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this. We've talked a little bit about a little bit in the last couple of days. Prior to that, we had kind of a dry spell for a couple of months, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
congratulations, dude. You're doing this.
yeah,
It's about time.
I know. Sitting in my own home, I feel like some of those old 1980s shows where they were filming in their basement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff Belanger is the one that really started this. So many people in the paranormal because of all of the because of all the events that have been canceled. All these people in the paranormal are trying to figure out what to do, and are out, to be quite honest, really bored. I watched Jeff and Amy Bruni yesterday on his speakeasy show. And that's one thing that Amy was saying, with Kindred Spirits, she gets to fly all the time. And now all of a sudden, nothing. And she really realizes how much she misses flying. So Jeff decided to do this, and he's been bringing in a lot of different people. I thought, you know what? He's doing it Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays
Yeah.
at either 6 or 7 o'clock, depending on where you are in the United States. And I decided, you know what? There's some sort of gap on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I'm going to do that. Also, they just got off.
Yeah.
Jeff and Dave Schrader just got off, and Tim Dennis just got off of Jeff's speakeasy, and Dave Schrader was wearing this shirt, and I got the shirt back from him, and so now I'm wearing it. So what are you drinking?
Well, ask a stupid question, Greg.
Yeah, you're in Ireland. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Is when you go into like a convenience store or liquor store?
Greg, you've tamed out on me, dude. this is either a practical joke on Greg's part where he's frozen still on his screen.
So, yeah. So you got to love technology, right? And here we are again. Can you hear me? Okay.
And so that's pretty much how it all happened, Greg.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching the show. See you guys
It's
later.
good to
Have a good
see you.
night.
All the best. Take care. God bless.
Yeah. Wow, man. I don't I have no clue of what just happened there. A little thing came up and said due to COVID-19 there's a large amount of broadband usage or something like that. And anyway, it kicked me out. So
Yeah.
anyway, if any of these people are still here, Faye Nelson, she's here. I've traveled the world with Faye. I've been to where have I think I've been to Romania with Faye. But anyway, I've been all over the place with Faye. Liz Cormel says hi. Do you know Liz?
Should I?
Well, I don't know. You know, she's over in your neck of the world. She's over in England. So she's on some. I don't know whether she lives in Warwickshire or not. But anyway, hey Connie, she's back. Nikki's here. Let's see who else. Colin Robertson, who's an old Navy friend of mine. We don't want to talk about him. So anyway, I think you left off with your drinking Guinness. Well, tonight I'm going to be drinking.
What?
What is it?
Looks like
Juicy
baked beans.
IPA.
Wicked
Yeah,
juicy IPA.
yeah. So that's a Shiner product.
So we have this. This is draft Guinness.
Yeah.
So whenever you crack it, it's got like a wee thing inside it. Makes it. I'll show you.
Ah.
You have to be quick. So what we do is we pour this, and then it needs. Guinness is the only drink that gives you patience.
Yeah.
Because you have to wait on it settling.
It gives me loose bowels. So.
So I'm going to set this right here, Greg. You see the way that's all cloudy?
Hold on. Let's see. Yeah.
Look at that.
Wait. There we go. Wow. What's it doing in there?
Yeah. So you have to wait until that rises all the way up to the top. So I'm going to set this here. And then you can let me know when it's ready. When that turns black, you can let me know when it's ready.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Mine doesn't do that. When I pour mine, it just, it doesn't do that. But, so,
Liz says sláinte, which is Gaelic for cheers. So,
what say it again?
Sláinte.
Sláinte. Man, I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah.
This is my Mayan crystal skull mug.
Dude, it's so good.
Yeah, I got in Las Vegas.
God, the time we were in LA, back at the end of last summer.
Yeah.
So we met up in this place and we had beers, and it was the first time I had ever drank grapefruit beer. Do you remember that stuff?
That's us right there. You're drinking a grapefruit beer. Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
That's
it's a bunch of badasses there. But, yeah.
That was a good time, man. So for those of you who don't know, Damian and I met at the All Ireland Paracon and kind of kept it in touch. And I don't know, it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. I don't remember.
5, Greg.
It was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you contacted me about 2 years ago, I guess. Yeah. On the we worked on a TV pitch together, an idea that you came up with, and you reached out to me, and I got some guys together, and I think I got a picture of his. There we go. And that's us. I think we're in front of was that the Discovery?
It was, yeah. Santa Barbara or Santa Monica Boulevard, was it?
Yeah. So we went up there and we did a pitch, and it was fun, man. I learned a ton in that 28 hours or something like that.
Yeah. It was
about
crazy.
TV and what they want, what they don't want, and that sort of thing.
And it's funny because there's so many good concepts out there. There's so many great original material out there as well, and it's trying to break the monotony of that perpetual cycle of format that we constantly see, right? So But there's positive things happening, I have to say, right across the whole genre. We're starting to see that in the last year, I believe, anyway, and with some good stuff coming out, and I look forward to it. But it's fascinating times.
I think your beer has turned. I think it's ready.
It is ready.
Is it ready? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's not over yet. The fun's not over yet.
Are you drinking it warm or?
Oh
cold?
No, this is cold. Sorry. Are you watching? This is where.
Oh
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
That's the Guinness mustache.
Well, Shiner beer is like the Guinness of Texas. So
yeah?
Yeah.
I have a link to Texas I never told you about.
A what?
A link. A family link. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on my mother's side, my great uncle was a priest. And he wasn't a normal priest. He was an army chaplain, but he was with the U.S. Air Force.
Okay.
In San Antonio in Texas. He 24 years. He was a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah.
And he retired to San Antonio. And I think is it Lakeland Air Force Base? Is that what you call it?
Lakeland. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, Lackland.
Lackland.
Yeah, Lackland. Yeah.
So
so I kind of want to touch on just so many people in the United States have some sort of connection to Ireland.
Yeah.
I looked at some stats one time, and it said that there's more Irish living outside of Ireland than that's actually living on the island of Ireland.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that one?
Yeah, I've also heard the one that said that if everybody who had Irish ancestry come back to Ireland, Ireland would sink beneath the waves, And
Yeah.
I think it's 44 million, Greg, outside of Ireland. It's something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to go over there, and I talk to people all the time that are like, I really want to go to Ireland. And it's like, well, I can't say what's stopping you, because now we do know COVID's stopping everything.
Dude.
Or at least the politicians are stopping everything.
Yeah.
And so
there's Joe Chin. Joe Chin's dropped in there.
He is?
Yeah.
What's going on, Joe?
Joe.
That's cool.
Joe Chin, like yourself, I've had the pleasure of meeting several times. And Joe Chin was actually in the All Ireland PowerCon as well.
You were there. I have a picture of you and him, and I was gonna put it on here, but I forgot. That was stupid. So
he's one of the nicest. He's one of the most beautiful. He won't make me saying this at all, but he's beautiful. He's really a beautiful person. He's unbelievable.
Yeah. I remember meeting him over there, and so anyway, so many people want to go over there, and it's not that expensive. I mean, you can get from Texas, you can get a round trip airfare for between $600 and $800.
Yeah.
And then if you just pay attention to what you're doing, you don't have to spend a ton of money, and it's absolutely beautiful.
It really is. And so in recent years, obviously, I love the irony of all of this, because as a race of storytellers, the irony wasn't lost on me when, in more modern times, Ireland has become this hub, this center of excellence for film and television. And there he is. And so you have the likes of Star Wars, Game of Thrones, History Channel's The Vikings. All of these different shows are filmed in Ireland. And so what we find is that because of those, the tourist trade has just gone through the roof in recent years, with record numbers of tourists coming into Ireland, and which is great. From obviously Ireland's no longer a manufacturing country, so Connie,
Connie's trying to figure out whether she was there or not. That's how much Guinness she drinks. She doesn't even know whether she was there.
Connie, she could have been, right?
Love you, Connie. Oh yeah.
I'm so bad with names. It's terrible. But so what's happened is that in recent years, Greg, the tourism has gone through the roof, right. And we're seeing record numbers of people coming into Ireland, and almost beyond the tourism, there's obviously the whole support infrastructure that goes into television and film. So everything from staff in the whole production, so from set riggers to extras and everything in between. It's created this whole new generation of uh, tradespeople and people who are able to become experts in the whole industry. And so,
Right.
so everything from Mel Gibson's Braveheart was filmed here, right through to Star Wars more recently with the famous islands in Kerry. I don't know. They're called the Skelligs.
Man, we were on a trip over there. We were with Dave Schrader and a bunch of these other folks that are chiming in here, and we were at some town that was really close to there. They had some sort of crystal factory there, like crystal bowls and stuff like that.
Waterford Crystal,
Water,
was it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that one. The one that nobody knows about. Um, yeah, and we
Everybody
were
gets
in
that
this.
for a wedding gift.
Yeah,
You get a
we
Waterford Crystal bowl.
right. We were at a trinket shop, and they had round trip boat rides to Skellig, and it was like 30 pound or something. I don't know. Anyway, it drove me insane because we didn't want we really wanted to go there, but we had to stay on the bus and keep going, and it would have been great to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been, and I live here. That said, the heritage site and the downside to all the tourism is that the, the huge numbers of tourists are now starting to impact upon the island and its wildlife,
Right.
and they're having to do stuff that they have to limit the numbers of people that are going. So I think there's only like four boats that have a license to bring tourists out, and because it's so wild, it's literally right off the southwestern tip of Ireland, and I mean it's right in the bottom of the Atlantic, where it meets the Atlantic from the Irish Sea, and very often the weather's so bad the boat trips can't make it out. So it's very seasonal. But
Right.
if you're ever here, even a view from the coastline is breathtaking. It's so beautiful.
Friend of mine, let's see, Sean Freddy. He was over there. He went to Skellig Michael, I guess, and
Yeah.
but him and I talk about this a lot. We did an Epic Tales podcast, and we talked about the, you know, legends of Ireland and the lore and everything. But it's a lot better when you can hear it from the real dude. you
Well,
know,
listen, I'm no authority, but I'll say this: if we take Star Wars as a theme, if Sean has been the Skellig Michael, we call it Skellig Vihel in Gaelic, and um, the whole notion of the Jedi Knights, for example. I mean, you really only have to go back into the pagan Irish past and the Druids and look at their culture, look at their lifestyle, look at their what they were purportedly. Of course, all of this is far back in antiquity, and anything that does exist in current times is very much influenced by the Christian scribes that documented and wrote down these histories and mythologies. But dude, if you Jedi Knight Druid, they're very much in with that. They call it the Force in Star Wars, whereas in ancient times in Celtic mythology, we had things called the Bua and Brie of the land, and within people, which was like this energy that could be disciplined and focused. If you read the old mythologies of it, so there's a lot of correlations there. It can go on into the likes of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, for example. I know Tolkien's on record as saying that he never ever drew any influences from Irish mythology, but man, you go in there and you look at Lord of the Rings and you look at
right?
it's all
Yeah,
there, everything from the
yeah.
the orcs, which is the Fomorians in Irish mythology, right through to Sauron with the evil eye. Well, in Irish mythology, Balor, the king of the Fomorians, had this evil eye, and it decimated everything it looked at. So
Well, Game of Thrones, man. Everywhere you go in any of those aisles, there's Game of Thrones stuff everywhere. I
dude,
mean,
so
it's
I live literally 2 miles from Winterfell.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so it's a beautiful part. They use lots of locations, obviously, right across the north of Ireland here. Um, two of the sets, dude, they have this stuff. I mean, HBO, um, the money that they drive into the making these TV shows,
Right.
unless you see it up close, I mean, it's so good that they could build a castle in the middle of a field, and you would be within feet of it, and you wouldn't know the difference between the real thing and the set. You know?
So how close are you? Most of that was filmed in the north, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've just noticed Sean Freddy has mentioned there the Red Branch Knights of Ireland, and of course, the Red Branch Knights are synonymous with the province of Ulster in the north, where I'm talking to you from now, um, and obviously the legends of Cuchulainn and the Fianna. And for your viewers and listeners who don't know, Cuchulainn it comes from the hero's age in Irish mythology, and very much this part of this pantheon. It's very very similar to the Greco-Roman Hercules and Zeus kind of character. So Cuchulainn
Gotcha.
was the son of the god Lu, and Cuchulainn was this mighty warrior who could take on a whole other army on his own. And he used to go into this battle rage. And they described it in the old text as whenever he went into this rage, he would have turned his bones turned 360 degrees within his skin. And as it did so, he grew larger and larger and larger, and more hideous and monstrous. And of course, that's a modern depiction of the Hulk,
Yeah.
you know. And then he went crazy, run in the battle, and killed 100 men. And so so if you look at the Hulk's green, isn't he?
Yeah. Hello.
Go, go
Yeah.
figure, eh?
Who would have thought? So yeah, man. You know when we in the United States, you know, we got this thing right. Think of Ireland and what we think of leprechauns. That's what happens in
Yeah,
your brain.
yeah.
But they don't have a lot of clout actually in Ireland, do they?
No,
No.
it's well, I think really, I mean, leprechauns are there. They're in the lore. There's some correlations to a race of people called the Fear Blog, the Sackmen, and who were, and again, this is all, nobody really knows the truth, but they reckon these guys came back to Ireland along with would you believe, at the time of the Israelite exodus from Egypt, and they made their way to Ireland, but they were described as small folk. And there's some loose correlations between them and the leprechauns, but the leprechauns are very much, I suppose, I don't know. Have you ever seen Darby O'Gill and the Little People, Greg?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was made in 1959. Walt Disney, famously, Sean Connery was in that movie. A very young Sean Connery was in that movie.
Right.
Um, he was singing.
That's rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, by the way, Carl Hutchinson is chiming in. Apparently, he has good whiskey and really loves Ireland. If you don't know Carl, he's a good dude. I've worked with Carl a couple of times when I've been over there in Britain and had a really good time over there. When
Yeah,
we went over for Sage Paracon a couple of times and have traveled all over that area.
so
So
beautiful parts of England as well. It's so rich
yeah,
and with its history, and it's funny that England is not unlike Ireland. I mean, Ireland, and again, Ireland is not unlike America, really, the United States, when you think about it, because our history is very much based on waves of invasions or waves of people coming to the island and over millennia.
right.
And of course, that's very similar to the United States with the multicultural aspects to it, with waves of people coming to the States as well. And of course, with England, with Britain, with the Anglo Saxons, with the Normans, Of course, the Vikings, and then of course the Romans. Before that, again, Britain had the Romans. Ireland didn't. The Romans, they give Ireland the name Hibernia, which I believe translates something to the land of eternal winter or something like that. I think it was too cold and miserable and damp over here for the Romans to come any further,
Right.
which is
Hey,
which is
Sean also said, so say that.
so that's pronounced she. It's pronounced Sheee, and she. Well, Sean's right. He is right. They're people of the mounds, and the she are, so they're the fairy folk of Ireland, and essentially who the she were. Um, it's believed that they were this supernatural race of beings who came. They were the fifth wave that came to Ireland, the Tua de Danann, and um, they overcame all of the old monsters and demons of the Fomorians, and they took over Ireland for 700 or for several hundred years. And at the dawn of the age of man allegedly, when they arrived, they were called the Milesians, and the Milesians fought with the Tuatha De Danann, and ultimately they won, but they came to a truce. And in ancient Ireland, with a lot of the lore, there's a lot of poetry, and poetry was a big thing here as well. And it seemed to be part of the magic around the Druids, and the Druids in Ireland were quite distinct from the Druids of Gaul and France, for example. But in Ireland, the Druidai, they were the judges. They were they presided over cultural and communal disputes. They were they provided pastoral care. Every high king of Ireland, every chieftain had a druid with them, a bit like Arthur and the Merlin, where the king had their sorcerer.
Right.
This was very much the norm in ancient Ireland, and so the she were the Tuatha De Danann, and what happened was the Milesians. The truce was that they would split Ireland in half. Although the Milesians outwitted them, and they said, "Well, we'll take the bit that's on the top, the surface, and you guys can have what's underneath." And so they were committed to these mounds, and the she then were led into the mounds, into the underworld. And
Now those mounds aren't the Karn that we were talking about.
well, here
Are
they're
they?
known. There's again, this has gone back to the sort of the Celtic time. We don't know too much about them, other than some of the more famous ones. For example, Newgrange. I don't know if you've ever been to Newgrange. If you haven't, and you guys are coming to Ireland,
I know.
I would definitely recommend it. So
I don't know
Newgrange,
how we missed that, but we did.
Newgrange is perhaps the single. This is a passage tomb. It's in the Boyne Valley in County Meath. Its Irish name is Brún na Boyne, which means the curve or the bend on the River Boyne. But this is a huge earthen mound that is orientated to the winter solstice, and so on the morning of the winter solstice, the sun rises and shines down through this small box in a window at the doorway of this mound, 63 feet down into a cruciform chamber, and illuminates the whole inside of this chamber. What's really interesting about this place is that it's 1,000 years older than Stonehenge and 500 years older than Khufu's pyramid in Giza.
Right. Wow.
And so it's even the graffiti inside is ancient,
Right.
So I was lucky enough. We took a tour once to it, my brothers and I, and inside, the graffiti artists of centuries ago were really highly skilled with chisels and hammers and Elizabethan script, and they were able to tap their names and the date into the rock inside, and so you have graffiti there from 18 whatever and so on and so forth,
Wow.
But I have to say, if you're going to go there, it's a huge, that whole area in County Meath is known as the Liz is saying about Noath and Doath, and there are two other cairns that are in the same area. So there's three of these earthen mounds that are planted in this valley, and not unlike that in its unrepaired state. The story of Newgrange is fascinating. It was discovered in the 1600s and the 17th century by an English landlord who was allegedly put his workers onto the land to build a road through a field, and they discovered the entrance to this huge mound, and they were savvy enough to realize this is something important, and so they protected it and invited different archaeologists of the time to come and write up on it. And so over the years and over the centuries, eventually it was excavated, and they brought it back to what they thought. It's quite controversial here in Ireland, but they brought it back to what it might have looked like at the time it was built, and they found a lot of rock, quartzite rock, white rock, and what surrounds the whole front of the mound. And you imagine it's a bit like the pyramids in Egypt whenever they were first rendered at the very beginning. From hundreds of miles away, you would have seen these things shining in the sunlight as beacons, and so Newgrange would have been the same from that point of view, So
I remember when I was over there, we were talking about fairy forts and fairy rings, and it seems like somebody had said that there's like 40,000 of these rings documented, and there may be another 10,000 that they haven't found.
Yeah.
And to put people in perspective of that, there's 40,000 of these rings. Ireland is actually it would take about 9 or 10 Irelands just to fit in Texas.
Yeah.
And Ireland basically would stretch, in Texas standards, would stretch from San Antonio to Dallas, a little bit further than Dallas, and a little wider. And to think that there's 40,000 of these things, and those of you who don't, here's an example of one. And you can see the cows down there in the bottom left-hand corner, and that's just one small one. There's smaller ones, and then there's obviously much bigger ones also. But
yeah, and I mean, what's shocking about these places is that, as you say, the pepper the landscape. So you'll notice these mounds on the hilltops all right across the island, and they've sat there for millennia untouched. You can only begin to imagine the amount of archaeology potentially that could be still to be discovered under the layers of history, as right across the island. And what was really I remember, from what I've read, around the spring equinox, there was a time in Ireland where on all of these hilltops, huge bonfires would have been lit at the beginning of spring, and each hilltop right around the island would have done the same thing to bring in spring and to cleanse the earth for the planting of the new harvest, and so on and so forth. But dude, right across Ireland, these things, some of them are just sitting there in the landscape, and it's really strange, because in any other country, you would imagine that there would be park rangers who would, the site would be policed, and to some extent, but these things, you just drive up in your car, you park, you walk up the field, and you can climb inside these things, and
well, that's what was so strange. Like when we went to Hellfire Club. Hellfire Club is outside of Dublin, right? The big one.
Yeah.
And you just walk up there. It's like, why in the world don't they have this thing protected and a park? Which it is a park, but it's an open park. You can just go there.
Yeah.
And I just know that if I was a teenager, guess where I would have been on the weekends.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, I remember as a teenager going to these scary places, these old castle ruins, and scaring the bejesus out of yourself, as they say here. And but it's interesting, I mean, so these cairns and this ancient archaeology, this stuff is thousands of years old, and the Hill of Tara in County Meath would have been where all the high kings of Ireland would have been enthroned, and this was the spiritual centre of the whole island. It's not too far from Tara, or from Newgrange, forgive me, and they have the Stone of Fall, which is in the Hill of Tara, which is this stone where the true King of Ireland was to place their hand on the stone. The stone lets out this roar across the land, and it's still there to this day. The archaeology in Tara is phenomenal, and I was reading a while back that back in between 1899 and 1902, there was an expedition from a British Israel joint expedition searching for the Ark of the Covenant below the Hill of Tara, and this went on for 3 years. But it just so happened that they picked the worst possible time to do that, because it was just right at the start of the cultural revival in Ireland at that time, and it attracted huge opposition, and eventually it was closed down, you know. But the story behind that itself is fascinating. But with the Ark, so Sean's been he knows, yeah.
Maybe he didn't touch it with the right appendage. You don't know. Maybe there's something else to this.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, the Banshee. You know, that's something that in folklore, even in the United States, people are really interested in it, and you know, what is that all about?
So from my understanding, the Banshee. I remember growing up with the tales of the Banshee.
Right.
So Ban is woman in Gaelic, Ban, and she is obviously so it's woman of the people of the Mound. So often she's associated with the Phantom Queen, the Morrigan in Irish lore, and she was always portrayed as a harbinger of doom. It was a sign that somebody was going to die, with close in the family. If you heard the wail of the Banshee, then you knew that somebody close to you was come to their end. And so, in the old mythology, they talk about Cuchulainn, who was known. Cuchulainn means the Hound of Ulster, or the Hound of Coolin. And there's a whole backstory to that, which we can maybe get into another time. But he met this old hag on the road in one of his battles, and she was washing his bloody armor in the river. And so this was seen as a sort of a foreboding, a sort of a warning that he was to die in battle. And of course, he did. But often the Morrigan would have been associated with the Banshee, but the Banshee in Irish lore, you know, especially on a stormy night, you could hear these screeches and cries around the area, and the families there would have, and they still talk about it to this day. I think that we talk about a furry tree earlier, Greg.
Yeah, we did.
Do you know that to this day in Ireland, yeah. So you see the way the fence is around that?
Yeah.
So to this day, farmers right across this island, and it's so funny because this island has been so divided with all of the trouble it's had over the years, and yet no matter what denomination you come from, of Christianity, when it comes to furry trees, farmers will not cut them down. You will have a perfectly clear field, and right bang in the middle, there'll be a furry tree.
Love it.
And no farmer will cut that down. You know.
Well, that was something, you know, that I was really interested in, and I was like, well, why aren't there more people studying this? But the whole fairy fort, or the ring forts, were really amazing to me on you know what their purpose is, and why always in this circle. You know, just why all the standard stuff with the ring forts. And I was trying to do some sort of correlation between, you know, were these defense areas, and they would just throw up a defense real quick, or is this a spiritual thing, a druid thing, or what?
So the truth is, nobody really knows. I think what a lot of people have sort of settled on is the fact that these were possibly timepieces that were to mark the changes of the seasons, so that crops could be planted. They were also thought to be places of worship. They were on hilltops, so they were closer to the sky. The Tuatha Dé Danann, the people, the Dinja Shi, they came from above, as opposed to the Fomorians, who came from under the sea or out of the sea. Um, the poetry around the Tuatha Dé Danann and their arrival in Ireland is recorded in an ancient book. It's a compilation of different the different annals of history that capture our. They're meant to be our history, but they're really a mythology. It's like an amalgamation of the two, and it's called the Lower Gola Erin, which translates to the Book of Invasions, and it charts all of the different waves of invasions that came to Ireland. And there's a poem within the Lower Gola Erin that talks about the arrival of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and if you read it in English, well, I'll read it to you in English. How's that? And you tell me what it sounds like.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, that'll be good.
It's very short, so it'll be dead quick.
Okay.
So it reads, "It is God who suffered them, though he restrained them. They landed with horror, with lofty deed, in their cloud of mighty combat of spectres upon a mountain of Clonmenic of Connacht, without distinction to discerning Ireland, without ships a ruthless course. The truth was not known beneath the sky of stars, whether they were of heaven or of earth."
Yeah.
What does that sound like to you?
Man,
In the modern sort of filter, put on the modern filter. What does that sound like to you?
man, I get a lot of connections for a lot of things.
So, I mean, clearly these are people that come down from above. There's lots of
Right.
associations with the biblical, the fallen angels.
Could be UFO. You could be aliens. You could be religious type thing. Yeah, man, it's
Everything.
so many different things.
And even these round structures covered in their white rock, what would they look like from above? You know?
Right.
Yeah. You know, there's so many different places you could go with it, and of course, part of the lore around the ferry is that if you inadvertently, at certain times, if you inadvertently wander into a ring wraith or a wrath, sorry, there's old stories where people would disappear, gone, and then reappear, possibly 100 years later, the same people. And these are the old stories that came out of people who would have had associations or interactions with the fairy, and so they're not unlike. They're very malevolent beings. You have to please them. You have to leave offerings and gifts for them. You don't want to piss these guys off. They will ruin your crop and curdle your milk. They'll do all these things, and so some of the old literature around that from the turn of the last century, I think it's a guy called Evans Wentz. You may have read some of this. He wrote about Scottish lore as well, and mythology, and talks about Jacques Vallée actually referred to him in his books, Messengers of Deception, where a lot of the stories in the old lore around the Celtic nations brought forward into the modern context kind of feels a wee bit along the same lines as alien abductions, as
Right.
you know, these type of interactions with otherworldly beings and so on. And a lot of the descriptions again applied in relation to the fairy could fit
Right.
with the more modern interpretations of abductions as well, you know. So
Yeah, I could see that absolutely. If since we had that little break, I'm going to add another 5 minutes onto our thing, and we'll go, and I'll try to crop it or something later, I guess.
no
But
worries.
Stephanie, this is Sean's wife. She's got a question for you. I'm going to let you read that. And for those of you who are watching, please, hit your comments. Tell us where you're from, and if you have any questions, throw them out there. Also, if you would share this broadcast, it would be great. So, do you have an answer for Stephanie?
Well, no, I wasn't aware of the growing pagan type devotion to Morrigan in the States. What I will say is that a lot of these old ancient Celtic gods and deities are very, they're based around nature, so and the elements, so air and earth and water and so on. The Morrigan, she seems within the Ulster cycle, for example, she seems to play this very sort of on the fence, sort of in between. She's the Phantom Queen. She has a bit of a. I think she has a bit of a thing for our hero in the story.
Right.
But she's also associated with death as well and war. She's a goddess of war, and but she plays a couple of different roles. But she's very much associated with nature and the elements, and that type of very, very ancient sort of pagan Celtic mythos with the Morrigan. She's the girl with. I don't know. Have you seen Thor, the new movie Thor, or
Yes.
one of those movies anyway, where his sister, she has the antlers coming out, and so the Morrigan were very much based around that type of character, and
Gotcha.
but yeah, no, but I wasn't aware of that in the United States, but that wouldn't surprise me because there seems to be a cultural revival happening these last, I'm going to say 10, 15, 20 years in
Well,
relation to.
I know for me, a druidic type life of druidic, or that sort of perspective on taking care of the world
Mhm.
and being back in nature, it 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 lands home with me.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, and again, there was druidesses as well, so there was no male patriarchy with the druids. It was very much an equal based societal system as it was described then, you know. But a lot of what we have about the druids, I've heard some really fascinating stories, some very, very tantalizing stuff around. So the way in Ireland, we have our oral tradition. So druids were very much, everything was taught orally, and this was whenever you entered into training to be a druid. This could have been 25 years of your life spent before you qualified as such, as it was. And everything was memorized. You were assured within your society. These people were purportedly had gifts in battle. For example, they could call in these great thick fogs onto a battlefield. They could cause the opposing army to go mad, drive them crazy with what sounds like today almost like shell shock or post traumatic stress. You know, they could send curses out on the opposing armies as well, and very often within the stories, one druid against another druid will do battles over the top of their armies, you know, and you'll hear this as well. But these people were very colourful. The normal depiction of these guys or girls with these hooded, they wore these very colourful garments, almost like rainbow garments. They had very short hair with plaited beards and so on and so forth. So, and that would have been part of the whole, I suppose, at the time with who you were in society was almost demonstrated by the clothes that you wore, the jewelry that you wore, and so on and so forth. And so the druids would have stood out in a big way. But in Ireland, we have this tradition of storytelling, which is oral storytelling, and we call these people shannigies. And so shannigies would have been people who would have went about Ireland to different villages long, long, long before newspapers, television, radio, all this sort of stuff. So these people would have traveled from village to village and regaled the local people of the local news, what was happening in the world outside of their area, and stuff like that. But it was always tied in with poetry, and there was always a lesson to be learned within the stories that they were told, whether it was for kids or for whatever the moral um, uh, uh,
the
the
lesson.
moral of the story was that it would be within that, you know. So,
Right.
but I've heard these lovely stories where actually there is a hidden secret history that exists outside of Ireland. It's purportedly thousands of years old, but of course, like everything in Ireland, it's surrounded in mystery and everything else, you know. So, but
Right. Well, man, we've been on for how long have we been on? Almost an hour.
yeah,
Um, and I wish we had more time. But I think the last thing I'm going to ask, you're up in Belfast, right, or close to Belfast?
yeah. I'm about 25 miles outside of Belfast. Yeah, that's
Okay.
where I'm originally from.
See, Lynn and I flew into Belfast, and we stayed there for a week.
Yeah,
Um, the city of Belfast has a very strange feel to it. It's very much different than Dublin. You
yeah,
know, just the overall feel, just walking around. I don't even know how to explain it. It is night and day. But
yeah.
we loved Belfast. We had a great time. We went to Dublin, and it was really cool when we went to Dublin because we went on Oktoberfest. We get down there, and there's nothing but a bunch of Germans in downtown Dublin, just oh my god, just tearing it up. Right?
Yeah.
I've never, yeah.
Any river. I'm a fisherman, Greg, and I love salmon fishing. And of course, with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, we get 2 months of good weather every year, and
Yeah.
it's eaten into these 2 months. You know what I mean? I need to get my vitamin D topped up really urgently here. But um, yeah, any river you go to in Ireland, you'll find a German angler fishing. You know,
That's
there's
the
always a
funny.
German. They love the fishing here.
Well, it's so cheap to fly from Germany to Ireland. You know, it's so cheap.
Yeah,
Ryanair and all these
yeah.
other government. It's so inexpensive to fly
But
around Europe. It's
you're
crazy.
quite right, Greg. Dublin's so multicultural, and Dublin has been like that since its very, very beginnings. The Vikings founded Dublin, and wave after wave of different settlers that came to Ireland all came into Dublin, you know. And whereas Belfast, because of the troubles in the north, since over the course of the last since the late, well, it's been going on for hundreds of years, but of course the last um, 40, 50 years, from the late 60s right through until the peace process about 20 years ago, um, would have would have kept a lot of people out of this part of Ireland, and which would have meant we didn't get an awful lot of tourism,
Right.
um, and so we were very much shielded from the rise of multicultural, multi-ethnic societies that were happening in other places of the world at that time. We had to play catch up to a certain extent after the peace process, and then yeah, all of a sudden it was okay to come here, this part of Ireland, because there was a time, of course, here where you know it was very militaristic. There was checkpoints, army, police patrols. It was always on the news. Thankfully, that's all gone now, um, for good. And
Well, when Lynn and I flew in, I told her, I said, let's. I want to do an experiment, and she doesn't like experiments too much. And I said, let's pick the oldest guy in the cab line to give us a ride to the hotel, right?
right,
So
yeah,
we kind of waited and we waited. People are getting cabs. And there was this pretty old guy. He was in his 80s. And I said, hey, how long have you been driving a cab? And he had been driving a cab for like 40 years, right? 50 years. And I said, can we can we hire you for the day? And he was like, of course, So we ended up hiring him, and he took us all over the place,
dude,
and we had an absolute blast. And he was a cab driver during the Troubles, and
yeah,
he was driving priests around, and
yeah,
they were getting stopped and yanked out of the car, and guns put to their head, and the whole deal. It
yeah,
was
yeah,
a
yeah,
huge deal.
yeah,
But it's one of those things, you can go do the tourist thing, and that can be fun, and you can learn the general stuff. But if you really want to know what's going on someplace, you go to one town, you stay there for a few days, and you
yeah,
talk to guys like him. You talk to the
yeah,
old guys that have been there forever, and it gives you such a better perspective on what life
Oh,
is really about.
every time. I'm just reading your message. Carl says that I've stayed at the Europa Hotel, and a tie from the Europa Hotel, just for everybody else that doesn't know, Greg, boasted at one time to be the most bombed hotel in Western Europe, you know?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, actually, I think we went there and had a drink. I think at the bar. It was, isn't it the is it the bar that got bombed so many times?
It was the
The
whole
whole
hotel. It was there were there was that many explosions around that hotel. I think the glazing in it alone. Oh my god, the glazing company. I think they had their own glazing company that looked after the hotel at one point. You know, it was.
So see, just doing this Facebook Live. Look, I made you 3 days worth of money right there.
Well, it's listen. It's like you get Ireland's a type of. It's like everywhere, I suppose. Everywhere. To your point, Greg, unless you really spend time, you get the whole. You can do the tourist thing, but unless you spend time in a place and really get to know it,
Right.
then you're not going. You're only going to touch on the surface stuff. You
Yeah,
know.
it's crazy when you fly to France or you fly to Britain or you fly to Ireland or you fly someplace and you stay at the Westin Hotel or the Hilton Garden Inn or you know, I just don't get it, man.
Yeah.
If I go there, I want to stay at a bed and breakfast. I want to stay at a tavern inn. I want to stay someplace that, is 500, 600 years old, that people have been,
Yeah.
lives have gone in and out of these places. It's just amazing to me.
And so you're right. And so one of the the Monty Python sketch. What did the Romans ever do for us?
Yeah,
Well, it's a
yeah,
bit like that with the Anglo Saxons here in Ireland. What did the
yeah,
Anglo Saxons ever do for us?
right.
But one of the obviously one of the beautiful things is right across the island. Again, hundreds and hundreds of these old castles, um, tar houses as they were known, um, lying quietly in the land for centuries, forgotten, been reclaimed by nature. There's no some of them. Some of the big houses of the time have survived because the owners have readapted to become hotels or spas, country retreats, often with golf courses nearby. You can go, you can, and it's. I suppose it's wonderful from the point of view that it's preserving these pieces of history that we have, and keeping life within its walls. Which it's a terrible shame, to watch these buildings. I have this. I love spending time in these places and been able to imagine what they would have looked like in their heyday. These huge
Right.
places, huge.
Yeah.
Some of these castles, Greg. One of them springs to mind up on the north coast, a place called Greencastle. So this is a big, huge castle that sits on the shore of Loch Foyle. Loch Foyle would have been a major. It's in the very north of the island, near the city of Derry, and Loch Foyle would have been in the industrial age would have seen a lot of marine traffic, ships and stuff coming down the loch. And of course, castles were built along its banks to protect cannons pointed out into the loch, to protect the inner sanctums of the harbour further down. And some of these places are 400, 500, 600 years old, and now they just lie as these silent, sleeping, empty vessels of age gone by that the ivy has creeped over its walls and reclaimed it. And there's no government investment into protecting these places. To be fair to the Irish government, there's probably far too many
Right.
um, to do that. But um,
Well,
you know,
hey, man, I think we should do this again. Um, Maybe we can get together here in the next month or two and do this again, because I actually, as we're sitting here talking, I'm coming up with more and more questions I want to ask you, and we're an hour and 8 minutes into this, so I want to
yeah,
make sure that I release everybody that is has been watching,
Yeah.
And do you have any? Do you have anything that you're working on now, or things that are coming up that you want to do as far as legends and lore kind of stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, so this last 5 years, Greg, you know my backstory. This last 5 years, I had a life event about 5 years ago.
Right.
I had to retire, um, and I was listening to Dave Allen recently, and Dave Allen said he came on stage and he said, "I've been away for 4 years." He says, "I've retired." He says, "But in order to keep myself accustomed to the life that I'm used to in retirement, I have to work." So that's pretty much where I am with that.
Right.
But I love writing, Greg, as you know, and I love fiction. I've got several projects that I've been working on in the unscripted space and in the scripted space, which is exciting.
Right.
So yeah, the answer to your question is yeah, I'm working on some stuff, and it's in the same space as what we've just been talking about this last hour. Um, so I see it as reclaiming um, our mythology with a modern twist, you know. But who knows? I don't care if anything ever happens with it. I just enjoy the art of creating story. And well, sure, I'm Irish. I suppose that's who we are, isn't it? Storytellers.
Yeah.
You know.
And the world is better for it. So thank you so much, Damien, for coming on here and hanging out,
Dude,
drinking a beer, and
dude, you're the craziest bastard I've ever met, and uh, one of the loveliest guys I've ever met as well.
well, I'm glad I can balance out my life that way.
Dude, you're so nice and polite on this.
What? What do you mean?
Everyone out there knows what I'm talking about. They
Hey,
know what I'm
this
talking
is the place I stayed after Ian and we left the nice hotel. This is a place I stayed. Yeah, that's.
Holy shit! You stayed in a skip.
Hey, I'm not going to spend money to sleep overnight. I've slept in garbage cans and all kinds of other stuff. I don't need. I was like, oh, $62 a night in downtown LA. That's got to be a good place.
Oh, dude, if I'm ever feeling, we have a video clip and of you and I drinking this. What was that we were drinking?
I don't know, but it was.
So it was one of these health shops.
Yeah, and it was like a Chipotle, I don't know, jalapeno thing or something.
Cayenne pepper.
Cayenne pepper. That's what it was. A cayenne pepper shot. What? Hello? Why?
I
Freaking
had a
Ian
nasal drip
Sanborn.
for about a week after that.
All right, man. Yeah, me too. All right.
I
Well,
know.
thank you, dude. And what time is it over there right now?
Dude, it's just after midnight,
All
and
right.
I have a wee saying from Ireland that I heard years ago. That I'll leave this with your listeners, and it's never meet the devil half road. Always let him come the full way. So there you go.
We've come the full way. Thank you so much. Thanks all of you guys that have watched Detective Diaries number 4, fourth one. And we're going to have MJ Dixon up next Tuesday. So MJ's a lot of fun. She's from Britain, and she's done a lot of different Paracons and TV shows and all kinds of stuff. So
She's a
hopefully,
powerful lady. They'll love her. She's a
yeah,
powerful lady.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. See you
Dude,
later.
you take care. All the best, Greg.
All
Bye,
right.
man. Bye,
Later.
bye, bye.